webinar is part of ARCA's ongoing series to provide disability-focused education and highlight the important and meaningful work of disability advocates across the globe. My name is Alexis Dukin, and I have the pleasure of hosting today's webinar. Before we begin, we would like to inform our online audience that you have the ability to ask questions by typing them in the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to type your questions during the presentation. I'll be making note of them, organizing them, and we will answer them as we go. And also during the last 10 to 15 minutes or so, I'll share them with the presenter if there are additional questions. For our attendee members who will be requesting continuing education credits, please be sure to sign in via the sign-in form provided in the chat box or provide your name. And please be sure to complete the evaluation, which will be provided at the end of this program in the chat box. If you have any difficulties accessing the evaluation at the end of this program, please email our ARCA office for any accessible copy of the evaluation. And at this time, I will introduce and welcome our guest speaker. Terry Leslie earned his bachelor's degree in sports medicine from Central Michigan University, a master's degree in counseling from Millersville University, and a postgraduate certificate in forensic vocational rehabilitation from Minnesota State University. He is certified as a vocational expert by the American Board of Vocational Experts and is a past president of that organization. He is a certified rehabilitation counselor, a licensed professional counselor, in Philadelphia and a registered rehabilitation provider in Maryland. His practice includes working as a vocational expert in personal injury, marital law, employment law, and other types of civil litigation. He has been providing vocational expert testimony in personal injury cases for over 30 years and in Social Security disability cases for over 25 years. Mr. Leslie's vocational expert opinions have been accepted in 22 counties in Pennsylvania, as well as Florida, Maryland, Delaware, California, New Jersey, Missouri, and other states at both the state and federal levels. Mr. Leslie, we are honored to have you join us today, and the floor is yours.
You may see me kind of looking back and forth, left and right. I use two screens here on my desk. I do not have the ability to use one screen anymore. I'm spoiled. So if you see me looking back and forth, it's because you guys are on one screen and PowerPoint's on another screen. I found this picture several years ago, and I just kind of hung on to it, but I thought it was interesting. All right, so let's get going. I don't know what everybody's background is, and because of the nature of how people are out here, I really can't see anybody raising their hand or doing anything like that. So if you have any questions at any time, just include those in the chat. We want to try to make this as interactive as possible and allow people to ask their questions as we go. I think that tends to be a little bit better flow. Just to give you a little bit of background of me, I have cases all over the country because I've developed relationships with different organizations and different professionals. Some people are not aware that we have the Disability or the Vaccine Injury Act. And so it's a $1 billion program that the federal government has for people that are injured from vaccines. And so then that involves cases that are in a different court level. And again, those cases are all over the country, as well as personal injury cases and some of the other stuff that we're going to go into here today. My work is predominantly forensic, and that means for the court. So almost everything that I do from a day-to-day perspective is going to be for litigation. Okay. I do very little direct one-to-one counseling anymore. If I do any of that, it's going to be to help somebody, normally an older adult, transition into another occupation. They may get burned out or they just want to go to another career field. It's important to understand that if you're doing traditional counseling, you can't do a forensic report in that same case. That's against the code of ethics for most organizations. That's considered having a dual relationship. So if you're counseling somebody in a mental health case or a divorce case or whatever it might be, um, or a situation that that's what they're going through, then you can't also get involved in a forensic case with that same person. And it's really important to make sure that you keep those distinctions so you don't run into any problems, because there's always going to be people that are going to go after your professional credentials. And the last thing that you want to do is to lose anything that you've spent so much time, money, and years um, to qualify to perform. All right. So a couple of things that we're going to go on are concepts such as earning capacity and also work-life expectancy. And we may get into other things, other terms. Again, if you have anything specific that you want to discuss, we'll take care of those as you bring them up.
And in the chat, some people posted just their backgrounds. We have LPC, CRCs, CVEs, as well as PhDs in the chat.
Okay. And it's going to be very important for you to make sure that your credentials are up to date and that your credentials are accurately published. Okay. Um, every week I find somebody that their credentials are not accurate, or they're using acronyms or initials that don't exist. It happens. Um, I don't know why it happens, okay, but just double check how you present yourself on your CV, your letterhead, everything else, to make sure that it's okay. All right, so these are cases that may involve a vocational expert. They could be personal injury. Personal injury is you run-of-the-mill motor vehicle accidents. It could be an accident that happened at work. Now that they're going to say that some other entity was responsible. Wrongful termination is simply a case in which a person feels that they were wrongly terminated. It could be because of their race. It could be because of some type of physical impairment or psychological impairment. It could be because of age. There's a variety of reasons. Wrongful death is simply any case in which a person may have died as a result of that accident. So, most of the times it's motor vehicle accidents, but it could also be medical malpractice. Somebody went in for a routine surgery and they died on the operating table, or they died while giving birth to a child, or it could be the death of the child as they were being born. So there's a variety of cases involving wrongful death. Long-term disability, you may already be associated with that or familiar with that. That's just simply cases that a person receives some type of disability benefit while they are working and they can no longer work. Traditional vocational rehabilitation counseling, job placement, you're probably all familiar with that. And that's going to do traditional counseling as well as some level of testing. Medical malpractice, people go in for surgeries and the result is not good, or they feel that the result should have been better, and so they may file suit for that. Product liability, I mentioned the vaccine injury program. That would be an example of a product liability case. Someone had routine vaccines and then they developed an allergic reaction or some other symptoms that are not associated with what they were being treated. Social Security disability is a multi-billion-dollar program here in the United States. There is certainly a need for vocational experts to work in that program. Unemployability, the Veterans Administration has disability rating systems, and they may give a veteran a rating that could be up to 100%. And but that doesn't mean that the person can't work. So if the person hires a vocational expert or a vocational rehabilitation counselor, that person may be able to argue that the injured veteran doesn't have the ability to maintain gainful employment in any capacity. Um, Marital law is could involve support. It could involve support to a child that's part of a relationship, whether it be a marriage or non-marriage relationship. It could also involve the determination of the earning capacity of either party. So it's not uncommon for me to have highly educated people that choose not to work because they're going through a divorce. And then one of the attorneys may hire someone like me to determine what that person's earning capacity is if they chose to work. Um, we have employment discrimination cases where someone may go through the interviewing process and may not be hired because of, in their opinion, maybe their age, their gender, their race, or something else that's precluding them from being hired. So they may file litigation indicating that they're being discriminated against because of those factors. Railroad retirement disability. In the United States, the majority of people are covered under Social Security retirement and Social Security disability, but the railroad system has their own program. They do not participate in Social Security or Social Security disability. So they have their own adjudication system that allows them to determine whether or not they're eligible for disability benefits within their own program. And then we have veterans total disability that's different than unemployability. Um, and again, it's just determining what their rating is and what they can do and what they can't do. Some of the veterans cases, the people are in their 80s or 90s, and we're still determining whether or not they have the ability to work. Okay, because they go all the way back to whenever that disability was occurred. Okay. Any questions on the types of disabilities or the types of cases in which a vocational expert may be involved? All right. I do this program with some of the colleges here in the area, and then at the end I say, hey, I say to the professor, nobody asked a question during the entire class, and the professor will say, yeah, that's the way it is. Okay. So let's go through some of the things with litigation. So any litigation normally is going to start with a complaint, and that's simply outlining the facts of the plaintiff's case, what they feel happened that shouldn't have happened, who the people are being sued, what their relationship is with the events that occurred. So if it's a medical malpractice case, it could include the doctors, the nurses, the hospital, a variety of other things.
We have a question in the
All right.
chat. Do insurance companies employ VEs directly for job placement? And what does that engagement look like? Is it employment for VE for a contract situation?
Um, so let me say this is that the answer to your question is typically no. That some insurance companies have gone to national providers because they don't want to deal with small companies to provide assistance to folks. Um, Over the past 25 years, the majority of states have gone to disability ratings and other systems as opposed to helping disabled workers find gainful employment. Um, the insurance companies are finding that it's more cost effective just simply to pay somebody to go away than to assist someone to return to work. And that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, that's also trickled into the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation Programs. Um, and in my opinion, dealing with those folks here in Pennsylvania, um, there's becoming less an emphasis on direct placement and more of an emphasis on just paying people to go away. And that's just the way it is. And personally, that's not the way it should be. But I think that there's a problem with vocational rehabilitation counselors being cost effective. So that if the insurance companies got more bang for their buck, then they would have more rehabilitation counselors. Just to piggyback off of that, um, there's also an issue with a lack of continuity and information for adaptive and assistive technology. Every software program, whatever you guys are using here today, has adaptive and assistive technology in it. But there's a huge disconnect on where people can go to get those services. Okay, and again, that's a detriment to our industry. Okay, because that needs to be promoted more, and it just simply isn't. Maryland used to have a fantastic program, and most of these programs are very hard to find. So again, a lot of this is the industry advocating for itself, okay, and promoting itself, because as you're aware, there's fewer and fewer people being having CRCs and everything else. So let me get off my soapbox and keep going. So we have the complaint that outlines the arguments, okay, and then in order to testify in most states, there has to be a report. Very few states will let the vocational expert or any other expert testify without a report. And here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, if your opinions are not in your report, you cannot testify on anything that's outside of your report. So even though you may have thoughts and ideas of a particular case, if you've not put them in writing, it doesn't matter. Okay. And so generally what happens is that the plaintiff will issue a complaint, the plaintiff will issue their expert reports, and then the defense will have a chance to issue their expert reports, and they may do rebuttal reports, okay? Or they may just issue their own reports. And then in most cases, then the expert will be asked to participate in a deposition in which the opposing attorney will have the opportunity to ask them questions regarding their work product, their report, their opinions. And then if it continues to go and the case isn't resolved, the same thing will happen with at the trial. So at the trial, then, essentially, one step beyond the deposition. And then during the trial, the different attorneys will be asking questions under oath that you're in a courtroom and you're testifying regarding your methodology, your opinions, and ultimately your conclusions. There's a lot to go into in these different areas, but I'm just going to do an overview here today. So the key thing here is if you want to go into this occupation, then I always tell my students you need to do a checkup from the neck up. Okay, if you have the personality where somebody is questioning you and then you get really mad and you go after them, you're not going to survive in this industry. Okay, it has to be a calm, professional demeanor. That if somebody questions you, you have the ability to explain your methodology, your opinions, how you got from point A to point B, and not take this stuff personally, okay? Because the attorneys are trying to advocate for their clients. And as a vocational expert, you need to make sure you're not advocating for anybody other than yourself. Okay, you're just being true to yourself and putting out your position there. Now, one of the questions in the chat box I saw come up is there a format for reports? Well, there really isn't. Okay, probably you can get my textbook. That's available online. That's got a variety of sample reports. You can get other books that other people have written. There's going to be a variety of sample reports in those books. But what I would encourage you to do that you follow a standard methodology so that you're going to have all of the same information from report to report, because anything you do can and will be used against you in a court of law. Okay. That, the attorneys have listservs, the attorneys have all of this access to all this data. If you say one thing in one report, it's going to be found. Okay. And they're going to use it against you in the next report. That's the same thing I tell all my students. Don't be on social media. Social media is huge. Don't be on it. Okay. I'm not on social media. I encourage other people, if you're going to do this work, don't be on social media, because the attorneys hire private investigators, or they can just go on your social media system. They're going to use whatever they can find against you. Okay. It's going to come out in court. All right. So let's talk a little bit about standards of practice. There are no standards of practice for vocational experts. This is the wild, wild west. And this is an area that we are aggressively working on. Hopefully, I'll have an article published in this fall that will try to develop standards of practice for vocational experts. We're finishing that up now. There are no accredited training programs that vocational experts or economists in personal injury cases must complete. We have people with a variety of backgrounds, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhDs. But again, there's no set mandatory training program. We have people that are board certified vocational experts, and we have people with no credentials that are doing this work. That's just simply the way it is. And I use the term economist, but we have people that are acting in that role that are bachelor's level CPAs or actuaries or whatever. Okay. Um, as a result, anyone can theoretically be a quote unquote vocational expert and say that their opinions are within a reasonable degree of professional certainty. So if you're just looking at starting into this type of work, your credentials are not going to be any better or any worse than anybody else that's been doing this work for years. Okay. In fact, I'd rather see people starting out and doing a quality job than people that have been doing this work for 30 or 40 years that their work product is not very good. All right. Because we see, or at least I see in this profession, that many people that have been doing this work for a long time, their reports are just poor quality, but they've been doing it for so long that they just continue to have the ability to move forward. So let's talk about some definitions. Earning capacity is the amount that a person can realistically earn considering his or her age, their health, their mental and physical condition, training, and earnings history. All right, because one of the things that vocational experts are going to be required to do is determine somebody's earning capacity before whatever event is being litigated, and then their earning capacity after that event. So you have an earning capacity for someone before the injuries in a personal injury case, and then you have their earning capacity after the personal injury happened and whatever their functional capacity is. It's not the most that an individual could earn over the course of their lifetime. For example, if a person is just entering the world of work, they would not have the earning capacity equal to the mean for their occupation. Okay, so you have to make the determination of what their earning capacity is, and normally that if you're working with an adult, that's going to be or can be based on what they've earned before the accident. I give an example that a new law school graduate would not have an earning capacity equal to that of a judge, right? The damages are as of the date that they occur. Be aware of people using current wage data to represent losses that occurred years ago. Again, I see this all the time. So if you have someone that has been moving in and out of the world of work, and let's say that they've never earned more than $7,000 a year, and then they're involved in a motor vehicle accident, is it more likely than not that if they would not have been involved in the motor vehicle accident, that they still would have been moving in and out of the world of work, making $7,000 a year? Well, that answer, in my opinion, is yes. Okay. Um, it's not unusual, though, to people, for a vocational expert to say, well, that person, based on their age, education, and gender, they should have been making 5 or 6 times more than that, right? Um, but that's the bottom line definition for earning capacity. Um, and it's important to determine that or be aware that that earning capacity is as of the date that the damages occurred. So it's not unusual for us to have litigation for damages that may have occurred 5 or 10 years ago. The earning capacity of that individual is as of when those damages occurred. Now, you may have a child case, okay, or someone that's um, not working because they're staying at home raising children. That doesn't mean that they don't have an earning capacity. You just have to determine what their earning capacity is when they would enter the world of work. Okay. So for kids' cases, we have different types of studies and statistics. And then obviously, if you have somebody that's been home raising family or taking care of elderly parents or whatever, you can take a look at their work history, their education, and then get an idea of what type of occupations that they would be qualified to perform and the earnings associated with that.
We have another question about earning capacity. Does earning capacity change depending on the venue, marital versus work comp versus personal injury, and the way you assess it?
It shouldn't. Okay. So if I have this all the time. I get the guy with a MBA or PhD that's living in mom's basement and the wife kicked him out because he's a bum. Well, he still has an earning capacity as somebody with a PhD or MBA. Okay. That could work 40 hours a week, but he chooses not to. All right. The same thing is true with any other case is that um, you know, what's their ability to earn if they walked out the door today and went into the world of work? How much money would they be able to make? Okay, and again, depending on what your methodology is, I may use their prior earnings. I may use the governmental data for occupations, for wages occupations. I may use state or local government data. I find that's more helpful because most of the states and local governments will break it down to um, counties and local areas, and then they'll also include entry level wages. So I like to use the state and local data better if I can get it. But your methodology should be the same no matter what. And again, you want to be consistent from case to case to case because the attorneys are going to find those cases um, and call you out on it.
Do you use the most recent labor market data, though, or the year of the injury?
So earning capacity is as of the date of whatever is being litigated. So the earning capacity is going to be as of, in that case, the date of the injury. But in a divorce case, there is no injury. So you're looking at current wage data. Okay, so it's going to be case dependent. But if there's a complaint, that complaint's going to outline, when somebody would have returned to work. Um, I'm sorry, the complaint's going to outline the date that the damages occurred. But if we're talking about a divorce case, then we're using the most current wage data that we can get. Um, yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. If it didn't, let me know. Now, part of determining what somebody has the capacity to earn also includes fringe benefits. And so hopefully, if you ask somebody questions about, how much they're making, how many hours per week they're working, everything else. They also ask about fringe benefits. If the person is a union employee, fringe benefits could be valued over 50% of their earnings because of the pension and everything else, paid time off that they have. This is an example of fringe benefits. I had a conversation with two attorneys this morning on this very topic. Um, and I include paid time off as a fringe benefit. Some people are going to, say, well, that they were paid for that. That's part of their wages, and that's in their salary. I take the position that the employee is going to value a position where they get 5 weeks of paid vacation more than what they would value a job with 1 week of paid vacation. Okay. And we need to be able to represent that increased value from one job to another job. So, paid time off, paid vacation, paid holidays, short term, long term disability, sick days, retirement, pension, stock options, employment, employer stock option programs. Um, all of these become a value, okay, that could be easily lost to the person, especially if they're going from a high industry union labor position into something else where they can't do that work and they're not going to get those union fringe benefits. That could be a significant loss to the person. Household services, again, is an area that I feel strongly that can represent a loss, because if the injured person cannot do this, then they've got to have somebody else do it. Or if it takes them longer to do these activities than what it did before their injuries, that's still a loss, okay, because they're not as um, productive in what they're trying to do. And just an example of household services would include shopping, lawn care, cooking, cleaning, transporting the children, other people where they need to go, taking care of pets, um, paying the bills, just managing the household. Um, it may involve simply taking longer to perform a task instead of an inability to perform the task. Um, and there may be a loss here, even though there's no loss of earnings or earning capacity. Another case that I was on the phone with the attorneys this morning, the woman died in a medical malpractice case. She wasn't working and hadn't worked in years. There was no intention of her ever going to work. So the only loss in that case was the loss of household services because she was married. She had, grandchildren, stepchildren that she was assisting with. And so that became the loss in their particular case. Right?
And we have a question. In 2026, people are working longer because they need the income. Also, people are working with the use of canes and walkers. Some people who are older are being forced out of work due to age. Is age discrimination hard to prove? And why does it take so long for older employers or employees to get work? Older workers are very valuable to the workforce. Younger people don't want to work.
All right. Well, I agree with all those statements. Um, yeah, this becomes cultural. And the statistics don't show that people are working longer now. Uh, there are more older workers in the workforce, but as a percentage of population, that percentage is increasing. So we're going to talk about that in another slide. The labor force participation rate for older workers is no higher than it has been the last 15 or 20 years. But it simply becomes a perception with employers. And we do have people that are working in the world of work with accommodations. Um, and my personal perspective is that um, older workers tend to be more loyal to their employers and they will stay as opposed to the younger worker. The younger workers are on their phones, they're doing all this other stuff, they're not as productive. So I think that that's simply something that, as a rehabilitation counselor, you've got to emphasize to the people that you're working with and how that person can sell themselves better. one of the things that when I'm doing my one-on-one career counseling with people, I always pivot everybody to a skill-based resume instead of a chronological resume. I think it really hurts the older worker if you're not using a skill-based resume. So I'd encourage you to do that. And then they just have to sell themselves, okay, and let the employer know, hey, you think that I might not be here, for more than 4 years. What's your average turnover for your younger workers? I'll bet you it's a lot less than 4 years. Okay. So
And we have
one of the,
another, oh,
go ahead.
sorry, we had one more question. Can you speak to expert witness directories and also give your thoughts on expert witness training companies, i.e., Speak, Expert Institute, or others? Some training seems pretty costly, but promising future referrals, more effective reporting formats as well.
Yeah. So um, I started doing this work in 1993. I never belonged to Seek until this year. I don't know that that's cost effective for me. It's just something that I did just to see if it's going to work. Um, I don't know that it's cost effective. A lot of these companies are in business to be in business. So it's something that you can take a look at. Um, it's something that I'll have to evaluate, and my staff will have to evaluate as of at the end of the year to see, if we've received referrals from those folks. There's a lot of companies that are expert witness companies, and all they do is they recruit expert witnesses for various areas in the country. Um, we've we've worked with some of those folks over the past 30 years. Honestly, I don't find them to be beneficial either. The best source of referrals are going to be the referrals that you generate on your own, and you develop relationships with law firms, and maybe insurance companies. Um, this is a relationship business. Where, in my case, um, probably all my cases are valued over $10 million, and so if you're doing high level damage cases, it's all about the relationships that you develop with your experts, because you want to be very confident that they're going to be good in court and um, write productive reports and all this other stuff. So it's something you can take a look at, but I don't find it to be helpful, or I haven't found it to be helpful before. We're going to quickly go through loss of retirement benefits because some venues find that this is a loss and some venues don't. But in my professional opinion, if a person has a reduction in their earning capacity, then they're going to have a reduction in how much they're going to receive in retirement benefits. Social Security retirement is based on what you've paid into it. If you're obviously injured and you're going to pay less into it, one would expect that you're going to receive less in Social Security retirement benefits after you leave the world of work. Um, I included a link in this slide, which you folks are all going to have a copy of the PowerPoints, that you can check out potential retirement benefits through SSA.gov. And similar calculations can be through unions, the state teachers union, things like that, that you can get an idea of, hey, if this person was injured or killed um, as a teacher, what are the survival benefits going to be to the estate compared to what they would have received if they would not injured or killed in the accident. And we're doing this not to make economic calculations, but just to give somebody a heads up that, hey, this person was making $100,000 a year before the accident. Now they're going to make $40,000 a year. They're going to have a loss someplace down the road because of this huge difference in how much they're making. That's going to impact their earnings, their quality of life after they retire. So somebody had said, we'll go ahead and take that question and I'll go into this.
Okay. I'm a PhD student in rehab counseling. I have been working on the clinical side doing clinical rehab counseling. How would someone interested in this work transition to forensic vocational assessments if they have mostly been working in mental health? Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, and so I think the best advice I could give you is to find a mentor. Okay, go on the American Board of Vocational Experts website, reach out to somebody that may or may not be within your geographic area, and ask them questions, get them, get information from them. I went, when I was starting out, and I still do, I go on Elliott and Fitzpatrick's website because most of their publications are focused on the area that we're talking about. And I purchase everything, okay, and just read and read and read and read. Um, and so that's the best way, from my perspective, and how you would go from a clinical to an expert side. And then probably the easiest area to get into is going to be divorce cases, marital law. There's some people that want to only um, specialize in that. I think those people are nuts. Okay. It's some of the most combative, stressful work that you can do. But it's work that's readily available. Okay. So I would reach out to most bar associations have sections for marital law, divorce work. Start developing relationships with those folks, and then you could, work up your way up the ladder from that. Um, but I've testified in divorce cases where I've had sheriff deputies standing on both sides of me. Okay, it can be tough, and I have no skin in the game. I don't really care, who gets what. I just want to make sure that I'm consistent with my opinions. So. Let's go into work-life expectancy, and then we'll go back to another question there. So somebody had said about people retiring, and retirement age is completely different than um, work-life expectancy. Okay. Work-life expectancy is the statistical amount of time that somebody is going to be involved in the world of work before they leave the world of work on a permanent basis. So it takes into account the statistical probability of death, disability, voluntary separation from the workplace, and involuntary separation from the workplace. So you're looking at someone that may choose to leave the world of work for a period of time, and you're also looking at people that are laid off, okay, and unemployed. It's influenced by age, gender, education, and their activity in the world of work. There are no studies and statistics showing that individuals work without interruption to the full Social Security retirement age. So if you see that in a report, you know that that's immediately false. Okay. Because if that was true, none of us would be employed. Right. There'd be no rehabilitation counselors because nobody would ever miss a day of work. All right. Um, and There are no studies or statistics showing that a reduction in work life expectancy is based on specific disabilities. That data does not exist. Okay. You also have the situation where some people have no financial ability to stop working. All right. So it's not uncommon to have some older folks that maybe they went through a divorce. There's no marital funds to split. She or he may have never worked in the past, so they don't have Social Security disability retirements. They've got to just keep working until they die. Right? So you have to take a look at the individual and not just always use run-of-the-mill statistics and just plug those in and say, oh, well, that's the way it's going to be. So.
Okay, the question before that was, what words of encouragement do you have for mature adults who are still in the workplace or who are looking for work? Also, what articles, books, or websites do you recommend reading for mature adults in the workplace or looking for work?
I think that one of the things that the older workers need to do is to make sure that they're not afraid to continue to learn, okay? Because everything is constantly changing. Um, and as far as going through any specific documents, AARP is a source. Okay, they've got a lot of things on their website that you may steer somebody towards. I know that they've got an area that's um, advocates for older workers and helping them obtain gainful employment. Um, that's probably the best I can do with that question because there's so many variables involved. But um, the biggest thing that I see is that you've got to play the numbers game. You've got to hit the numbers. And so many of the younger folks, they'll apply for a job and then they'll just wait to hear back from that job. And if you're working with an older worker, you got to just let them know, hey, this is a numbers game. And if you go on Indeed or Monster or Career Builder or whatever else might be in your area, you just got to hit the numbers. And it's not only hitting the numbers, but it's applying to that job with the highest quality resume that you can put together that focuses on your skill set. Okay. And obviously, Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, Office of Aging, there's a variety of sources that people can go to get assistance with resume help or classes or just things to increase their computer skills, stuff like that. Okay.
And then that follow-up question to the question before that was, I was told that one would need vocational experience instead of mental health experience before transitioning into the forensic work. Do you find that to be true?
No, there's a lot of PhD psychologists that are doing forensic work. There's not as many that as there was before because of the pay scale that for Social Security disability. Probably 35 years ago, um, Social Security was paying more for their vocational experts than what the PhD psychologists could make in private practice. So there was a lot of PhD psychologists that moved into the forensic world. I've had former employees of mine that are PhD psychologists that I've trained. Um, you can make that change, but you just have to understand what the bricks and mortar is for vocational opinions. So your focus really isn't so much on uh, the family aspect of the person that you're evaluating. It's more the person you're evaluating and their work history, their education, and that stuff. So it takes some change. Um, but yeah, there's no reason that a mental health counselor can't, go into forensic work. Um, is just, get sample reports and just kind of see what the methodology is being used. Okay. So somebody said about the older workers and their working. This is the labor force participation rates that were published in 2021 and then projected off to 2031. And so you can see that as of for males, 25 to 64 age group, that the labor force participation rate has been pretty constant. Okay, we're going from the 68 to 69, 70%. Is projected to go higher. I will tell you in my research, none of the projections end up being correct. Okay, this is pretty stable. And then for women, for women, the same is true. So it's 59% for ages 65 to 55 to 64. And then this is just people that are in the labor force. You have a significant portion of these people that are working part-time instead of full-time. Right? But this is data is published by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and it's readily available. So again, if you're looking at data and saying, hey, what group of people are going to be employed more than another group, you have the data out there. It's there.
And you have
Uh,
about 10 minutes left.
okay, all right. I'm gonna let you guys go through some of these screens and some of these stuff. I want to get to this case. And I'm not going to get all the way through this. I do have a hard stop at 1, so I need to go. But this is an interesting case that I was the vocational expert in that was heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2023. I completed this vocational report in the beginning of 2020. If you look at research this, you're going to see that there's some articles that have that Mr. Groff was looking to change the work rules for the post office after he was hired. But he was hired before the post office changed to Sunday deliveries of Amazon packages in his area. So I live and work. My office is here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We have a very large Amish population. We have a very large Mennonite population. Mr. Groff is an evangelical Christian who does not work on Sundays. He graduated from the Mennonite high school here in town. He completed mission trips around the country. He also taught English as a second language in China. So this isn't somebody that just, hey, I don't want to work Sundays. This is him. Okay. Um, I'll give you some examples. In 2009, he completed a mission trip to Kenya. 2010, he started doing a temp work for the post office, and the post office brings a lot of their employees in as temps and then hires them for regular positions. 2011, he did another mission trip. 2012, he started as a rural carrier for the post office. In 2015, the post office started making Sunday deliveries for Amazon. But this required that he work on the Sabbath. And so the postmaster, where the small post office that he was working, made accommodations for him by allowing him to take paid leave on Sundays or to get other people to work his Sundays. Eventually, he no longer had that option, and he transferred to another post office that didn't have Sunday deliveries for Amazon. But then he lost his seniority going to the other post office. And then the new post office started doing Sunday deliveries for Amazon. So part of this whole litigation process is that, he sued because he didn't feel it was appropriate for him to work on Sundays. It was against his religious beliefs. And this went all the way through the court system and all the way up to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court decided that that Mr. Groff wasn't provided a reasonable accommodation. He should have been allowed to work regular business hours for the post office and not have to work on Sundays because it affected his religious beliefs. Now, it's interesting to note that the post office as a business doesn't work on Sundays. Okay, you can't get your mail on Sundays. They won't pick up the mail on Sundays. The post office are not open on Sundays. They are only doing work on Sundays because they are a subcontractor for Amazon. Okay, so anyway, I thought this whole case was a little interesting because it was something that was unique, and it's another area where vocational experts can get involved with wrongful termination, other types of cases. So we have a few minutes. Are there any questions that for the good of the cause?
Can you say the website again for the I think you listed the books that you go to so that I can put it in the chat.
Oh, it's Elliott and Fitzpatrick. Um, yeah, I think it's elliottandfitzpatrick.com, and the and is the and sign.
And
Yeah,
there is a book on there that you have published as well, right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I'm not promoting.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not promoting my book or the course that I teach, but I I don't know of any other places out there um, that are currently teaching in this area. The problem is that this is such a niche area. We had programs with Minnesota State, we had University of Florida, we had George Mason over the years, and those programs have kind of gone by the wayside because um, you're not looking at a huge volume of people that are going into these courses. Um, And so if you're looking at a university structure, um, they're not viable. Okay. And that's just the way it is. Unfortunately, some of the CRC programs are the same way. So I included in the last slide my contact information, my email address. Feel free to reach out. And, if you have any questions that you didn't want to um, address here, certainly email me, and I'm pretty good at responding to my emails.
And we would like to provide our sincerest gratitude to Mr. Leslie for this wonderful and meaningful presentation on the use of vocational experts in litigation. Mr. Leslie, we are most grateful for you taking the time to share with us today. For those in attendance, we appreciate you joining us today, and we would like to invite you to save the date for our next ARCA webinar scheduled on August 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern via Zoom. The title of that webinar will be From Onboarding to Outreach, How NCRTM Supports VR Professionals at Every Level. Webinar registration and more information about upcoming webinars will be found on our website and via email. We hope that you will consider joining us. On behalf of the American Rehabilitation Counseling Association, we thank you all again and wish each of you a wonderful weekend ahead.